Now, sports gamblers, Scott Spreitzer, one of the leaders and most trusted names in the country. Nobody watches and studies games more than he does. From TalkSports.com, here's Scott Spreitzer, exclusively on with Rockin' Manuch with Jimmy B on ESPN 620.
All right, Scott Spreitzer joins us here on the right side of guest sign here on ESPN Radio Phoenix. All right, Scott, we're going to start BYU Texas Tech with Tech laying like 12.5. Is this line too high, too low, or just right?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty fair line. If you like Tech here, we saw, what the line was and what they did to BYU in Lubbock. And although there hasn't been like a big adjustment as far as going from Lubbock to, somewhat of a neutral site, BYU fans will travel for this game. It's, I think fair. We had Texas Tech in the regular season clash, and it was a pretty easy win after the first quarter. And they won the game 29-7, despite quite a bit of inefficiency on offense, if you will, with Texas Tech. They had to settle for field goals deep in Cougar territory. Obviously, part of that's BYU stopping them. Part of that was Texas Tech just not making the plays that they normally do, but they still won by 22. And the biggest take from that game for me was that the defense was going up against the BYU offense that wants to punish opposing defenses, but they couldn't because the Tech defense was too quick, too athletic, too physical, and BYU couldn't do what they wanted on the ground and the trenches in that meeting. They held the Cougars to 255 yards on less than 4 yards per play, and they outrushed BYU's 21st ranked rush offense, 149-67. And then I went back, kind of looked at Bear Bachmeier. I like this kid, young guy. But if you look at his last 6 games, he's a 59% passer, 108 for 182. And then you got Baron Morton for Tech, who's top 10 in the nation in passing efficiency. So I think their balanced attack is, again, going to be a little bit too much for BYU, and Tech will go on to win and cover this number.
And to that point, I thought what you said there, Scott, that Bachmeier, they're running too much, I think. And then how do you keep up with Texas Tech if you don't have that passing game / 4-minute offense to get back into a game if they jump all over you?
Exactly. And I really thought that they should have focused a little bit more on the passing game, as you just mentioned. And he never really – listen, I don't want to take anything away from BYU or Bachmeier. He's had a really good first season. But if you look at those last 6 games, it's like he's kind of regressing rather than progressing. And I think a lot of that has to do with that style of offense they're calling. And again, they're supposed to be top 25 in rushing, and they were held to 67 yards by Tech because they couldn't diverse the offense. And that's what I think is going to happen again. I think Tech's just too quick, too athletic on defense for BYU to just run the football at them and hope to find, an aerial game when they're down in this contest. So it plays out to Tech for me, and I get it. I know a lot of people that want to jump on BYU here in revenge, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
All right, Scott, the second game, number 3, Georgia versus number 9, Alabama. Last time I looked, it was Georgia minus 2.5. I guess you could call this a quasi-neutral site, even though it's in Georgia for all the Georgia fans. How are you looking on this game? How are you leaning on this?
Yeah, neither team's been as dominant as they were a couple of years ago, and the Tide have no ground game. They're outside the top 100 in rushing yards per game, which feels odd when you talk about the Tide. And we saw it play out this season earlier in the meeting. Georgia outrushed Bama by 110 yards, but the Tide outpassed Georgia by 150. But it was kind of at a time when Gunnar Stockton hadn't really hit his stride and hadn't figured out the offense yet. And they still had the ball inside the Bama 10-yard line late in the second half with a chance to take the lead, but they came up empty. So since then, Stockton's 15 touchdown passes, 5 picks, nice 3-to-1 ratio in a tough conference. And then I looked at last week's game. I'm watching that. I'm watching Bama get outgained by 130 yards by Auburn. They've had 3 of their last 6 wins come by 1 score, Bama, and the 20-9 win over LSU was a 1-score game until the final minutes when they got the ball at the LSU 37, kicked a field goal late in the game to win by 11. They can't run the ball. They've got a good running back in Jam Miller, but he might not play. He's their best by far running back for Bama, and he may not play in this one. He's listed as questionable. So I do think the Bulldogs will exact some revenge here. What I did do, what I think is the wise thing to do, is to play him to win on the money line, like a baseball bet. And right now, instead of laying 2.5, you can play Georgia minus $1.35 just to win. So you're laying $135 to win 100. as opposed to, 110 bucks to win 100 if you lay the 2.5. So I think just to win outright at minus $1.35 is the way to go.
And Scott, I'm just curious, when you watch Georgia dismantle Texas in the second half, Gunnar Stockton looked like they took the handcuffs off that young man.
Yeah.
Looks like he grew up, he developed, and it seems like he's been hitting on all cylinders since. Was that the true litmus test for a game like this?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, I like the way Georgia was looking in a game like that as opposed to Alabama when they faced Auburn. And I know it's a huge rivalry game, but still Auburn looked like the wrong side, even though they won the football game. Alabama looked like the wrong side for a good chunk of that contest. So the way Stockton played against Texas, what an excellent defense Texas has, I thought it just showed, that those stats aren't a fluke since the Alabama game, that 3-to-1 ratio that he's had through the air. So I think they get the job done here against Bama. I hate backing teams when it gets to the nitty-gritty, like games like this or the upcoming playoffs, that are so one-dimensional on offense, and that's Alabama.
He's Scott Spreitzer, DocSports.com. All right, Indiana, Ohio State, the line has been moving. Right now, DraftKings has it at 4. Why is this line moving?
Yeah, the money just coming in on the Hoosiers, man. I mean, I remember I was doing an opening line show Sunday night, and we were talking about the movement on some of these games. That Indiana line just kept dropping and dropping and dropping, which meant on Sunday, for the next week, that's not public money. That's guys who are making a living putting their money where their mouth is, and they just kept hammering Indiana. And I've been a little surprised that it hasn't come back the other way at all. I do know that the Buckeyes, they're going to get their first look at Fernando Mendoza, which is going to be different than when they saw Kevin Rourke. And that's not to take much away from Kevin Rourke last year, but he's a stand-in-the-pocket quarterback, and if you get a pass rush against him, he's going to take a lot of hits, and he's not going to be able to make do a lot of damage with his feet. So they get beat by 23 last year with Kevin Rourke. What I like about Mendoza, he's a very mature running or duo quarterback, and he's not so much a duo threat, but he can run. He just doesn't, all of a sudden his first option's out of the window and it's covered, so he decides to take off and run. That's not Mendoza. He'll go through his progressions, and he's got the kind of feet and, again, the maturity level between the years to know when it's a good move to escape the pocket instead of putting his offensive line in trouble. So even though this line is dropped, and I hate the fact that it's dropped for people who want to jump in on Indiana here, I still think they're the right side of this contest. They trailed Iowa with 10 minutes to go. They escaped Penn State, had some good fortune in that late win, and they did win at Oregon in a tight game. Tough place to play, obviously. Bottom line is that they faced adversity, and they've trailed with a minute to go in a game. Ohio State hasn't faced adversity since week 1, and if Arch Manning was playing then like he is now, maybe they beat Ohio State up in the shoe. So I like Indiana a little bit here, guys, even with that line movement.
All right, it's got the next game all dressed up, nowhere to go, no matter who wins. Duke versus number 17, Virginia. Virginia -4. Oh, Miami. You're going to have to hope for a lot of miracles to be happening on tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, boy, this just shows about that playoff committee what a joke it is, if I may say so. I mean, if you look at the top 25 before the season began with a lot of people like that are on this committee, 12 of the 25 teams that were in the preseason top 25 aren't in the top 25 now. Half the top 25. They've really got to go to power ratings. They got to get smart guys who, know what they're talking about when it comes to power ratings into this mix. And I apologize for my dog whining. I guess she thinks she's hungry already. But anyway, this is a tough one. We have a balanced offense, 23rd in total yards per game, and a balanced defense, top 25 in total yards per game allowed when it comes to Virginia. And Duke's one-dimensional offense that's almost all about the pass. And then Duke's got that horrible defense. That 34-17 Virginia win was 31-3 with about 10 minutes to go. It was more like a 38-10 game. I think Virginia gets them again here, guys.
All right, let's go to the NFL. Rams and Cardinals. Rams coming off that loss to Carolina last week. 8.5, that number too high, too low?
Yeah, 8.5. Well, here's what I look at this line this week. The Rams were 10.5 on the road last week against a playoff contender. That's now 7-6, Carolina. And the Rams had just played and beaten Tampa Bay, Seattle, and San Francisco. So it was a bad spot. And, I always say to people, do yourself a favor when it comes to betting in the NFL. Do not lay double digits on the road. You may occasionally win a game. You're going to get beat in the long run. And that's what they were, 10.5 last week on the road. This week, they're on the road against a familiar opponent, a team that's 3-9 and out of the mix. 0-4 and 1-9 slides, pretty much one-dimensional on offense, and a defense that gives up 25 a game, and now they're only laying 8. So the Rams didn't make my top 5 this week, guys, but it's either the Rams or pass. And really, handicapping is all about the lines and the numbers, and I think this price is about 2 points too short.
Scott, when it comes to like these bowl games, the game between Tulane and North Texas, both the coaches are gone. They've gone on to other jobs. How does that play into handicapping at all?
Yeah, I got to have a coordinator who takes over, who has been, like, if it's an offensive coordinator, the offense has been playing well since he's been there, whether it be one season or even more. I have to look at that offensive coordinator, if they're a very good offense, and say, okay, he's the interim coach. He can handle the offensive play calling. There's going to be no drop-off there. And then see if the head coach was, offense or defense, and then bet it accordingly or handicapping accordingly. But it's got to be somebody who was with the program all season long, who's made the interim head coach, and they had to have something to do with the play calling. And no offense to, like, say, a tight ends coach, but if a tight ends coach is taking over at the interim coach, it's a knock against him if he hasn't been the guy calling the plays on offense or on defense throughout the course of the season. So it has to be somebody I think the players are extremely familiar with. He's had a lot to do with the play calling on either side of the football, and then I'll look to play on those guys. Otherwise, I kind of just leave those bowls alone if they're matched up against each other.
Okay.
If I get that, really good coach on one sideline who's been there for 5 years and an interim coach who's not mixed in with the play calling, I'll look to bet that coach has been around for a while in that staff.
Troy and James Madison, that starts about 5 o'clock our time, 24.5 for a championship game?
Yeah, I know, guys, but I had to lay it earlier this week. I actually
really?
did. And I got a better number. I didn't get the opener. The opener was like 20.5, and it shot up on Sunday like crazy. It was like 23 by Sunday night. I got it at 21, so I'm not feeling too bad about not getting it at 20.5. But, yeah, for me, guys, I think this is a tough spot for, I think James Madison's probably going to roll in this one. I like the way that their coach handled signing on with UCLA. It wasn't a situation like we saw with Lane Kiffin. He did it the right way. And so I think these players are going to play for this guy, and I think they'll play well, and I just think they're too balanced in offense and going to have one big game left in them. And he's going to be with them, by the way, as long as they survive, if they move on to a bowl game or if they somehow get lucky and make a group of 5 playoff spot. But, yeah, I laid 21 in this one. Now, the line, again, has gotten a little crazy since then. But, boy, I just don't think Troy's going to hang with them, guys.
Hey, just real quick, you talk about the head coaches staying or moving on. How about coordinators like Colin Klein will go to K-State, but he's going to stay on at A&M throughout the playoffs. Brian Hartline going to go to South Florida, but he's going to stay at Ohio State throughout the playoffs. Is there any kind of minutia that's decided as far as handicapping with those guys? Their attention may not be completely on the bowl game or the playoffs because they got other fish to fry while they're at their particular schools.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's kind of a mystery because we've never really been able to quantify, like a Colin Klein, let's say, if he's got his attention on recruiting for K-State. We've never been able to quantify, how it affects their current job. I would think that Colin Klein is going to be fine, say, with Hartline at Ohio State. I tend to give guys like that at the big schools, at the big programs, the benefit of the doubt, where maybe if it's at a lesser program and he's moving up, he's all excited, he's looking to build that program up. I got to tell you, being a Kansas State guy that you are, I'm surprised that he stepped down. And I really thought there was going to be at least 3 or 4 years left as head coach of Kansas State. And even though they didn't reach where they wanted to be this season, he's still one of my top 10 favorite college coaches.
He got an extension last year. He was good to go to 2030. We all thought that. He just got tired of all the NIL and all the minutiae with these young guys nowadays, Scott, as you can imagine.
Oh, absolutely. It's got to be, it's got to be such a tough job compared to what it used to be. Listen, I thought Lane Kiffin's presser the other day was a lot of, BS, I guess you could say. Yeah. But at the same time, when he said, I thought there was some truth in there when he said, this is about the players and the money for the players. Is that the truth or what? That's the way it is nowadays. So, obviously he said he wasn't worried about the money. Well, that's because he was going to bank millions, and he knew that. But the bottom line is when he came out and said this is all about these days, about the money for the players, he certainly was speaking the truth and preaching the truth at that point. And so it's got to be extremely tough. And it's also tough to see these coaches getting, kicked out of town after 1 year or 3 bad games. like Matt Campbell going to Penn State. Listen, Penn State, to me, I've told you guys before, they're the Auburn of the Big Ten. And good luck, Matt Campbell. I like him. But I really think if Campbell was that big of a coaching power or power-rated coach, he would have been taken out of Iowa State 3 or 4 years ago. Every time the Cyclones got to a level where people expected big things, they dropped off. And so good luck with that, Penn State. I mean, I hope he does well. But, that looks like an 8-4, 9-3 program every year.
Scott, we love you, man. Great stuff. We'll talk to you next week.
Good luck, guys. Take care.
That's Scott Spreitzer, DocSports.com, bringing it as he always does. Hey, on Monday we'll be back at Biggs, Eagles, Chargers watch party. We broadcast from 1 to 4, and then we stick around for the game. And at halftime, 20 fans will roll the jumbo dice for cash. That's Monday at Biggs in Peoria, Biggs American Bar and Grill, right there in the P83 district. All right, are we watching the birth of true free agency in college football? NIL, the portal, and coaching moves say yes. More coming up next. Get into that. It's Rocket Manuch with Jimmy B as we're live at Right Toyota.